These pills are fake. I'm calling the police. The flight attendant's voice cut through the cabin's low hum. The prescription bottle had just hit the airplane floor with a hollow clatter. Before anyone could fully process her words, the flight attendant, Jessica Palmer, brought her heel down hard. With a series of sharp, deliberate crunches, she ground pill after precious pill into a fine white powder against the drab gray carpet. A scream, sharp as a knife, pierced the air. "No, I need those. I need my medicine." 8-year-old Maya Richardson reached desperately for what remained, her tiny hands trembling. But Jessica kicked the bottle away, her face a mask of disgust and suspicion. Maya's identical twin, Mia, grabbed the flight attendant's arm, her voice fracturing into sobs. "Please, stop. Please. My sister needs her pills. She'll get sick. Please." Jessica jerked her arm free and stepped back, her eyes cold and unmoved. "I don't believe you," she announced, loud enough for the surrounding passengers to hear. "Children your age don't need medication like this. You're lying." The twins stood frozen in their matching purple dresses, tears streaming down their identical faces as the entire cabin seemed to hold its breath in collective horror. Hands flew to mouths. A dozen phones emerged, their small red lights blinking as they began to record. Maya clutched her chest, her breathing already growing labored. "My heart," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "Grandma, my heart." The elderly woman with them, Grace Richardson, lunged from her seat, her expression a terrifying mix of rage and panic. "What have you done? That child could die without her medication. She has a heart condition." Her voice cracked as she dropped to her knees, frantically trying to salvage any uncrushed pills. Jessica crossed her arms, looking down at the desperate grandmother with pure contempt. "Ma'am, you need to return to your seat and calm down, or I will have you removed from this aircraft." Grace looked up, her own tears now flowing freely. "Removed? My granddaughter is in distress and you're threatening me?" But Jessica was no longer listening. She reached for the intercom. "Security to economy row 15. We have disruptive passengers for escort." Maya's knees buckled. Mia caught her, and the two girls sank to the floor together. Maya, please!" Mia's voice rose to a hysterical pitch. "Somebody help her. Please, somebody help my sister." Passengers were on their feet now, some shouting at Jessica, others asking if they could help. A woman across the aisle began to sob openly. "She's just a baby. They're just babies. What is wrong with you?" The cabin descended into chaos. Voices overlapped, phones recorded the scene, and Grace begged for help. Then, a sharp crackle cut through the pandemonium. The intercom was live. The captain's voice filled the cabin, firm, controlled, and with an undeniable edge of authority. "Flight attendant supervisor to the cockpit, immediately." A heavy silence fell, somehow louder than the shouting that had preceded it. Then, the voice came again, a current of barely suppressed fury running beneath the professional calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are returning to the gate. This flight is grounded." The color drained from Jessica Palmer's face. She stared at the intercom speaker as if it had condemned her. Murmurs rippled through the passengers, confusion mixing with anger. From the back, a man shouted, "Good! Ground the flight! That woman just tried to kill a child!" Grace pulled both twins into a tight embrace, cradling Maya as she struggled for each breath. And in the cockpit, a call was being made that would change everything. If you want to see how this shocking situation unfolds, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. If you stand against injustice to children, type yes and tell us where you're watching from. You will get a response from Living Stories. But this story didn't begin with crushed pills on an airplane. It began earlier that morning in a quiet home in Atlanta, where two little girls were preparing for the saddest journey of their young lives. That morning had started like any other, except it wasn't. At 6 a.m., Maya and Mia Richardson woke in their shared bedroom, their matching braided ponytails tousled from sleep. They were 8 years old, identical in every way but one, a crucial difference invisible to the eye. Maya had been born with a congenital heart defect, a condition that demanded medication every 6 hours. No exceptions, no delays. A ticking clock governed her life. Mia, though perfectly healthy, carried the weight of her sister's fragility as if it were her own. They dressed in silence, pulling on matching purple dresses. These weren't just any dresses. Their grandmother in Chicago, the one they were flying to say goodbye to, had bought them for her 75th birthday. She called them her double blessings and said purple was the color of royalty. Now, they would wear them to her funeral. Even at 8, they understood the solemnity of the occasion. Their father, Captain Marcus Richardson, was already in his pilot's uniform. At 45, with 25 years of experience, Marcus commanded respect without demanding it. His colleagues called him Captain Cool because nothing rattled him. But this morning his hands trembled as he made breakfast. Today, he had to send his babies on a plane without him, and one of those babies had a heart that needed constant watching. At 6:30, a video call came through. Dr. Angela Richardson's face filled the tablet screen, exhaustion etched into the lines around her eyes. She was in Chicago, arranging her mother's funeral. A pulmonologist who saved lives for a living, she had been powerless to save her own mother. Now she couldn't even fly home to get her daughters. "Good morning, my beautiful girls," she said, her voice catching slightly. Maya and Mia crowded the screen, telling her about the dresses and their stuffed animals, chattering about how Grandma Grace would be with them. Angela smiled, but then her tone shifted, becoming the calm, clinical voice of a doctor. "Maya, baby, listen carefully. Your medication is in Grandma Grace's bag. You take it every 6 hours. Not 5 hours and 50 minutes, not 6 hours and 10 minutes. Exactly every 6 hours. Understand?" Maya nodded solemnly. She was used to this speech. Her heart condition allowed no room for error. "I understand, Mommy. Exactly on time." Mia, her constant shadow, leaned in. "I'll remind her, Mommy. I promise. I'll watch the clock." The bond between them was profound. They felt each other's pain. When Maya was hospitalized at 5, Mia had cried herself sick. She lived with a quiet, constant anxiety for her sister, always watching, always ready. To her, protecting Maya was as natural as breathing. Marcus drove them to the airport himself. In the back seat, between the twins, sat his mother, Grace Richardson. At 68, the retired principal was a woman of immense dignity and strength, the kind forged by a generation of black women who had to be stronger than the world demanded. She had raised Marcus alone, teaching him to hold his head high and to strive for an excellence the world would grant him no other way. Grace had packed Maya's medication with meticulous care. The prescription bottle was in a clear Ziploc bag, accompanied by a letter from Maya's cardiologist, medical records, and detailed instructions. Grace wasn't just packing medicine. She was arming herself against a world she knew could be unkind, a world that might look at her family and make snap judgments. At security, Marcus knelt before his daughters, his captain's wings gleaming on his crisp uniform. "You girls listen to Grandma Grace. Maya, take your medicine. Mia, help your sister, but don't worry too much. Grandma's got this." He kissed their foreheads, then turned to his mother. "Mama, keep her medicine accessible. If anything feels wrong, you call me. I don't care if I'm over the Atlantic, you call." "We'll be fine, baby," Grace said, squeezing his hand, seeing the fear behind his strong facade. "You fly safe." Marcus watched them disappear into the crowd, fighting the urge to call them back. At gate B-17, the sadness of their trip was momentarily forgotten in the excitement of flight. Grace bought them magazines and snacks. By the time they boarded Flight 447 to Chicago, the twins were chattering happily, faces pressed to the window. They settled into row 15, Grace on the aisle, Maya in the middle, and Mia at the window. An elderly couple across the aisle, George and Patricia Henderson, were immediately charmed by the two little girls in their beautiful purple dresses. But not everyone was. Flight attendant Jessica Palmer, a woman with a reputation for being harsh and judgmental, watched the family with narrowed eyes. She stood near the galley, observing them. "That's going to be a problem," she muttered to her colleague, Linda Martinez. "I can always tell." Linda, who had learned that disagreeing with Jessica only led to trouble, stayed silent, an uneasy knot forming in her stomach. Also on the crew was Tommy Chen, a young flight attendant just 2 months on the job. He saw the adorable twins and made a mental note to bring them some pilot wings pins later. The plane filled. Grace double-checked that Maya's medicine was in the seat pocket in front of her, easily within reach. An alarm was set on her phone. Everything was planned. Everything should have been fine. The plane pushed back from the gate, the engines roared to life, and as Flight 447 lifted off the runway, no one, Not Grace, not the twins, not even Jessica Palmer herself, knew that this flight would never make it to Chicago. The first hour was perfectly normal. The seatbelt sign switched off. Maya and Mia watched the clouds roll by like fields of cotton. But Jessica never stopped watching them. Her gaze was constant, analytical. "Jess, what's wrong?" Linda finally asked in a low voice. "You've been staring at row 15 since we boarded." 15 years doing this, you develop an instinct for trouble, Jessica replied, her eyes fixed on the family. Unsupervised children. They're with their grandmother, Linda pointed out. Jessica shot her a cold look. You know what I mean. Just watch. There'll be a problem. Linda said no more, the knot in her stomach tightening. Across the aisle, Patricia Henderson was enchanted. You girls are just precious, she said, leaning over. What beautiful dresses. Our grandma bought them for her birthday, Maya said. But now we're wearing them to her funeral because she died. The stark honesty of a child brought tears to Patricia's eyes. She reached out and touched Grace's hand. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry for your loss. George Henderson, Patricia's husband, smiled kindly. They seem like wonderful girls. Mia proudly showed them a drawing of the airplane. Maya held up a book about clouds. It was a moment of innocent joy, the kind that makes strangers smile. Jessica Palmer walked by at that exact moment and stopped. I'll need you to keep the children quiet, she said, her voice clipped and cold. Other passengers are trying to rest. The row fell silent. The girls had been speaking in normal voices. Grace looked up at her, her own voice polite but firm. My granddaughters are very well behaved. They are not disturbing anyone. Jessica's eyes dropped to Grace's carry-on in the seat pocket. That bag looks overstuffed. I may need to have it checked. And in that moment, Grace felt the first cold flutter of real alarm. Grace knew the bag. She knew the assumptions people made the moment they saw its bulky, medical-grade shape, but she held her composure, a mask of serene calm. Everything in this bag, she said, her voice even, is necessary for our flight. It contains medical supplies for my granddaughter. A single, skeptical eyebrow arched on Jessica's face. Medical supplies? She repeated, the two words dripping with disbelief. She turned and walked away, but not before Grace saw it. A shared glance with her colleague, Linda. It was a look that confirmed every one of Grace's fears. Across the aisle, Patricia Henderson leaned over again. Don't you pay her any mind, honey. Your girls are angels. But Grace's hands trembled slightly as she checked her phone. 45 minutes until Maya's next dose. The plane leveled off at cruising altitude and the cabin settled into that strange mid-flight lull where time seems to both crawl and vanish. The beverage cart began its slow journey down the aisle. Passengers dozed, read, or stared out at the endless blue. Maya was lost in her book about clouds when the soft chime of Grace's alarm sounded. The little girl's head snapped up. Is it time, Grandma? Grace nodded, her smile warm as she reached for the bag. It's time, baby. Beside her, Mia sat up straighter, ever the helper. Maya needs her medicine now, she announced with practiced importance. It's been exactly 6 hours. Grace unzipped the bag and retrieved a clear Ziploc, inside which was a meticulously organized collection. The amber prescription bottle, a letter from the doctor, and copies of Maya's medical records. The label on the bottle was crisp and clear. Maya Richardson, age 8. Heart medication. Take 1 tablet every 6 hours. Dr. Patricia Kim, Atlanta Children's Cardiology. Grace twisted the cap and shook a single small pink pill into Maya's waiting palm. Maya held it up, looking expectantly for a cup of water. At that exact moment, Tommy Chen was passing with the beverage cart. Grace raised her hand politely. Excuse me, could we get some water, please? Tommy's face lit up with an eager friendliness that hadn't yet been trained out of him. Of course. Then his eyes fell on the pill in Maya's hand. Oh, would you like some apple juice instead? Sometimes it helps the medicine go down. The twins' faces brightened in perfect unison. Yes, please. With a smile, Tommy poured a cup and handed it to Maya. There you go. Hope you feel better. The girls giggled, charmed by his kindness, and Maya lifted the pill to her lips. Stop. The voice was sharp, commanding, cutting through the low hum of the cabin. Jessica Palmer materialized from the galley, her posture like a hawk descending on its prey. What is that child taking? Grace turned, the open prescription bottle still in her hand. It's her prescribed heart medication. She takes it every 6 hours. Jessica's eyes narrowed into slits. I need to see that bottle. Of course. Grace held it out, angling the label toward the flight attendant. As you can see, it was prescribed to my granddaughter by her cardiologist. But Jessica didn't just look. She lunged forward and snatched the bottle from Grace's hand. The aggression of the movement was so sudden that both twins flinched. Mia's hand shot out to find her sister's, squeezing it tight. Jessica held the bottle up to the light, turning it over and over, examining it with the theatrical scrutiny of a forensic investigator at a crime scene. The performance was intentional, designed to draw attention, and it worked. Passengers in the surrounding rows began to turn and watch. These pills look suspicious, Jessica announced, her voice loud enough for half the cabin to hear. How do I know this prescription is real? A hot flush of anger rose in Grace's chest, but she forced her voice to remain steady. Because it has my granddaughter's name, her doctor's name, the pharmacy information, and the prescription number, all of which are clearly labeled on the bottle you are currently holding. Mia's small voice quivered with confusion and fear. Grandma, why is the lady being mean? Maya was frozen, the pink pill still in one hand, the cup of juice in the other, her wide eyes locked on the unfolding drama. More passengers were turning now, their faces a mixture of concern and curiosity. Some were already raising their phones. Jessica turned the bottle over again. This could be anything. People try to bring all sorts of things onto planes. Grace's composure finally began to crack. That is a prescription medication for an 8-year-old child with a documented heart condition. Would you like to see her medical records? Her doctor's letter? I have all the documentation right here. But Jessica wasn't interested in documentation. She was interested in control. I've been doing this job for 15 years, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. I've seen people use children as cover to smuggle drugs. It's more common than you think. The accusation hung in the air like a poison. Maya's lower lip began to tremble. Tears welled in her dark eyes and spilled over, tracing silent paths down her cheeks. She didn't understand what was happening, only that this woman was saying terrible things and she couldn't take her medicine. Grace stood, all 68 years of dignity and strength radiating from her small frame. This is completely inappropriate. You are terrorizing a sick child and accusing me of a crime. I will not tolerate it. Her voice had changed. The soft grandmother had vanished, replaced by the school principal of 40 years, a woman who had commanded respect from thousands and would not be intimidated by a bully in a uniform. 3 rows up, a man in a business suit named Robert Wells stood. Excuse me, he said, his voice ringing with disbelief. This is clearly out of line. These are children. Look at them. They're 8 years old and you're scaring them to tears. Jessica whipped around to face him. Sir, I need you to mind your business and not interfere with crew safety duties. Robert didn't budge. Crew safety duties? You're harassing a family. There's nothing safe about what you're doing. Tommy Chen stood frozen by his cart, a knot of panic tightening in his stomach. He knew this was wrong, but Jessica was senior crew. He was new. He was supposed to defer. But then he looked at the little girls, their faces streaked with tears, and at their grandmother standing with such quiet defiance, and he couldn't stay silent. He stepped forward. Jessica, maybe we should just let her take the medication. The prescription label looks completely legitimate. Jessica's head snapped toward him, her eyes like chips of ice. Tommy, get back to your duties. Now. Or I will write you up for insubordination. Do you understand me? Color flooded Tommy's face. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He glanced at the twins, then back at Jessica's furious expression and took a step back, his shoulders slumping in visible defeat. Near the galley, Linda Martinez watched it all, a sick feeling churning in her gut. She knew Jessica was out of control. But 7 years of working with her, 7 years of seeing what happened to those who challenged her, 7 years of choosing her own job security over doing the right thing, kept her feet rooted to the floor. Mia was sobbing now, a chain reaction to her sister's distress. Both girls clung to Grace, their matching purple dresses crumpled. Maya still clutched the single pill in her dampening palm, completely lost. Grace wrapped her arms around them and looked directly at Jessica Palmer. Her voice was quiet now, but it carried an undeniable weight of authority. I am demanding to speak with the captain of this aircraft, immediately. The cabin had fallen silent. Every eye was on them. Phones were recording. Jessica stood there, the prescription bottle in her hand, her face flushed, her jaw tight. For the first time, a flicker of something that looked like fear entered her eyes. Maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to realize she had gone too far. But she wasn't done, not even close. Grace saw it first, the subtle shift in Maya's breathing. It was becoming faster, shallower. The stress was taking its toll. For a child with her condition, it was dangerous. Panic finally laced Grace's voice. My granddaughter needs that medication. Now, not in 5 minutes. Right now. Jessica looked down at the bottle in her hand, at the pills inside, and then she made a choice that would echo for the rest of her life. I'm confiscating this medication, she declared, her voice ringing with false authority. It will be returned at the gate once proper authorities can verify its legitimacy. The cabin erupted. Grace's mouth fell open. Robert Wells shouted, Are you insane? Patricia Henderson gasped, the sound like a sob. And Maya, sweet, innocent Maya, looked up at Jessica with tears streaming down her face and pleaded in a heartbreaking whisper, Please, my heart needs it now, not in 2 hours. Now. The simple, desperate truth of it should have pierced any human heart. But Jessica's face remained a mask of stone. Mia grabbed at Jessica's sleeve. Please give my sister her medicine. She'll get very sick. Please. The child was begging, but Jessica shook her arm free as if shooing away a fly. My granddaughter's health is at serious risk, Grace said, her voice low and cold. This is medical negligence. If anything happens to her, you will be held responsible. Do you understand me? Jessica stepped closer, invading Grace's space. Ma'am, you are creating a safety issue on this aircraft. I was a school principal for 30 years, Grace retorted, her small frame seeming to grow in stature. I have dealt with bullies who thought their sliver of authority made them untouchable. You do not intimidate me. Now give my granddaughter her medication or get me the captain. Those are your only 2 options. The 2 women stood locked in a battle of wills, the entire cabin holding its breath. And then Jessica Palmer did something no one could have anticipated. She twisted the cap off the prescription bottle. Grace's eyes widened. What are you doing? Jessica turned the bottle upside down. The small pink tablets, the tiny pills keeping an 8-year-old's heart beating steadily, cascaded onto the gray airplane carpet, 20, 30, 40 of them scattered across the aisle floor. And before anyone could react, Jessica lifted her foot and brought her heel down hard, again and again, grinding the life-saving medication into pink dust. The sound that came from the twins was inhuman, a shriek of pure, uncomprehending horror. No, Maya screamed. My medicine, my medicine. Grace's hand flew to her mouth. You just assaulted a child, she shouted, her voice breaking. You just destroyed the medication that is keeping my granddaughter alive. Jessica ground her heel into the powder one last time. These could be dangerous substances, she said coolly. I'm protecting the passengers. Maya's hands flew to her chest. Her breathing grew ragged, her little body heaving with panicked, shallow gasps. A full-blown panic attack was colliding with genuine cardiac distress. Maya, somebody help her, Mia shrieked. Please, help my sister. Grace dropped to her knees in the aisle, her hands frantically sifting through the crushed powder, searching for anything salvageable. Tears streamed down her face. She found one pill, mostly intact but coated in carpet fibers and filth. She held it up like a cursed jewel. Can I give her this? Please, God, can I give her this one? But she knew she couldn't. She looked up, her eyes pleading with the strangers around her. Does anyone have heart medication? Anything? Please, I'm begging you. Patricia Henderson was sobbing openly, pointing a trembling finger at Jessica. You should be ashamed of yourself. What is wrong with you? Her husband, George, stood beside her, his voice booming with the authority of a retired attorney. I have just witnessed assault, child endangerment, and destruction of medical property. Everyone on this plane is a witness. You have created a legal nightmare for yourself and this airline. Unfazed, Jessica reached for the intercom. Security needed at row 15 immediately. We have passengers causing a major disturbance. Her voice over the PA system was calm, professional, the voice of a victim maintaining order. Tommy Chen had seen enough. His career be damned. He sprinted to the galley, grabbed the crew phone, and punched in the code for the cockpit. Cockpit, this is Tommy. We have a serious emergency. A flight attendant just destroyed a child's heart medication. The child is 8 years old, and she's going into distress. There was a pause. The co-pilot's voice came back, sharp and focused. Say again? A child's medication was destroyed? Yes, sir, Tommy stammered. She accused the family of smuggling drugs. She crushed the pills. The little girl is having trouble breathing. Who are the passengers? Tommy scrolled through the manifest on his tablet. Richardson, Grace Richardson, and her twin granddaughters, Maya and Mia, age 8. The longest pause yet. Then the co-pilot's voice returned, laced with a new urgency that made Tommy's blood run cold. Did you say Grace Richardson traveling with twin granddaughters? Yes, sir. They're going to a funeral in Chicago. Stay on the line, Tommy. I need to make a call. Do not hang up this phone. Back in the aisle, a large man named Derek Stone was making his way forward. He'd seen a disruptive family and a flight attendant trying to do her job. Sir, Jessica said, seizing the opportunity, I may need your assistance. Derek nodded grimly and loomed over Grace, who was still on her knees cradling Maya. Ma'am, he boomed, you need to sit down and control your kids. You're disrupting the entire flight. Grace looked up at him, her eyes blazing with a fierce, unbreakable fire. Young man, I taught boys like you for 30 years. I am not afraid of you. My granddaughter is sick, so unless you are a cardiologist, you need to step away from us, now. The raw authority in her voice, even from her knees, made him take an involuntary step back. Robert Wells moved to stand between them. You need to back off, right now. The tension was a lit fuse. And finally, from her frozen post by the galley, Linda Martinez found her voice. Jessica, she cried out, this has gone way too far. These are babies. This is their grandmother. You have to stop this. Jessica whirled around, her voice a whip crack in the tense cabin air. Linda, shut your mouth. Shut it right now, or I will report you for insubordination and see to it that you are fired. Do you understand me? Linda's face went white, but this time she held her ground. You destroyed a child's medication, Jessica. A child's heart medication. Do you have any idea what you've done? A flush of crimson crept up Jessica's neck, her professional composure finally cracking. I did what was necessary for the safety of this flight. That is my job, and if you can't support that, you are putting every single person on this plane at risk. And then, a sound cut through the argument that made every heart freeze. It came from Maya, a sharp, desperate gasp for air that didn't seem to reach her lungs. Her small body went rigid against her grandmother, then suddenly slumped, limp as a doll. Her eyes rolled back in their sockets. Grace caught her, cradling her frail form and letting out a scream of pure terror. She's going into cardiac distress. My baby is going into cardiac distress. Somebody help me, please, God, someone help. Mia began shaking her sister, her voice high and hysterical. Maya, wake up properly. Don't go to sleep, Maya. Grace's voice rose, a desperate prayer mingling with the twins' frantic cries. Lord Jesus, please, please don't take this baby from me. She's only 8 years old. Please, God, please. Tears streamed down her face, splashing onto the soft fabric of Maya's purple dress. The little girl's lips were turning a pale, dusky blue. Her breathing was a series of shallow, rapid flutters. Around them, the cabin erupted. Passengers were on their feet, some crying, some shouting at Jessica, others with phones held high, their screens glowing in the dim light. In the galley, Tommy was still on the phone with the cockpit, his voice strained. Sir, the child is in serious distress. She isn't breathing right. Her grandmother says she's going into cardiac arrest. The co-pilot's voice crackled back, laced with a barely controlled fury. Is there a doctor on board? Tommy grabbed the main intercom. Is there a doctor on board? We have a medical emergency in the main cabin. An 8-year-old child in cardiac distress. Any medical professionals, please identify yourselves immediately. If you're watching this and you aren't subscribed, hit that button right now, because what happens next will absolutely blow your mind. And tell me in the comments, if you were a passenger on this plane, would you have intervened? What would you have done? 3 people stood up at once. A woman from business class began pushing her way back. A man from an exit row was already on the move. And from first class, someone was running, weaving through the crowded aisle. Maya's life hung in the balance. Grace held her granddaughter and prayed. Mia clung to them both, her small body racked with sobs. And somewhere high over the Atlantic Ocean, a phone was ringing in the cockpit of a 747 bound for London. Captain Marcus Richardson was about to receive the call that every parent dreads, and in response, he would make a decision that would shock the entire aviation world. Grace's voice, loud and filled with terror, rose above the chaos. My 8-year-old granddaughter is going into cardiac distress. She needs help right now. A woman pushed through the crowd, her movements precise and urgent. Patricia Wong, a pediatric nurse, dropped to her knees beside them. Her fingers found the thready pulse at Maya's neck, and her face grew grim. Her heart rate is dangerously irregular. This child needs emergency medical attention immediately. She could go into full cardiac arrest at any moment. Mia screamed, the high-pitched wail of a child who understands her twin might be dying. Grace pulled both girls closer, her eyes locking on Jessica with a gaze that could burn through steel. But Jessica just looked annoyed. We will land as scheduled in 90 minutes. Medical personnel will meet us at the gate. There is no need for this excessive drama over a child's tantrum. She's not throwing a tantrum, Mia shrieked through her tears. She's really sick. Why won't you believe us? Grace's voice dropped, becoming a quiet, terrifying promise. When we land, I will personally ensure you never work in this industry again. I will make it my mission. Before Jessica could retort, the intercom crackled to life, and the pilot's voice filled the cabin. Flight attendant supervisor to the cockpit phone, please. Immediately. Irritated, Jessica strode to the galley and picked up the handset. This is Palmer, a man's voice came through, clipped and official. This is First Officer Davis. Do we have passengers named Grace Richardson and Maya Richardson, age 8, on board? Jessica's eyebrows shot up. Yes, why? A pause stretched into a heavy silence. Has there been an incident involving the child's prescription medication? Jessica bristled, her voice becoming defensive. There was a situation with an elderly passenger attempting to give a child suspicious pills. I confiscated and destroyed them as per safety protocols. The situation is under control. The silence that followed was even longer, charged with unspoken fury. When First Officer Davis spoke again, his voice was as cold and hard as ice. Captain Marcus Richardson has been notified and is currently on the phone with air traffic control. Stand by. The blood drained from Jessica's face. Captain Richardson? The main intercom clicked on again. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are returning to the gate immediately. This flight is officially grounded due to a medical emergency involving a minor passenger and a case of serious crew misconduct. The cabin erupted. Linda, seizing the moment, grabbed the intercom. Is there a doctor on board? We need a doctor immediately for an 8-year-old child in cardiac distress. A woman who had been running from first class was already there, a medical bag in her hand. I'm Dr. Sarah Kim, pediatric cardiologist from Boston Children's Hospital. She knelt beside Grace and Maya. Tell me what happened. Grace's words tumbled out in a frantic rush. She has a congenital heart condition. She needs this medication every 6 hours. The flight attendant destroyed it. She's been without it for almost 2 hours. Dr. Kim was already checking Maya's vitals. How much does she weigh? 52 pounds. Dr. Kim pulled a vial and syringe from her bag. I have pediatric emergency heart medication. This will stabilize her until we can get her to a hospital. I need your permission. Yes, please. Save my grandbaby, Grace cried without hesitation. Jessica found her voice. You can't administer unauthorized medication. That's against regulations. A man's voice boomed through the cabin, dripping with authority. It was George Henderson, the lawyer. If you say one more word, if you interfere in any way with the emergency medical treatment of a child that you endangered, I will personally see to it that you face criminal charges. Sit down and shut your mouth. Dr. Kim administered the life-saving injection as Grace held Maya steady. This should start to work within 5 minutes, but she needs a hospital as soon as we land. Robert Wells, still recording, spoke loud enough for his phone's microphone to pick it up clearly. You're going to be famous, Jessica Palmer. This video is going everywhere. As the plane banked, turning back toward Atlanta, Grace rocked Maya gently, her soft voice singing an old hymn. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. Mia held her sister's hand, whispering, Daddy will fix everything when we land. Daddy will fix it. In the galley, Tommy stood with Linda, the phone still pressed to his ear. The co-pilot had asked him to confirm the grandmother's name, Grace Richardson, and then he'd said he needed to contact Captain Marcus Richardson immediately. Linda's eyes went wide with dawning horror. Captain Richardson? Marcus Richardson? Oh my God, that's his mother. Those are his daughters. Tommy just nodded grimly. The co-pilot's voice came back, strained. Captain Richardson is flying the London route. They're patching him through mid-flight. Jessica, her face a mask of panic and rage, pushed toward them. Who is Captain Richardson? Tommy looked at her, not with anger but with a kind of profound pity. Captain Marcus Richardson, 25 years of service. One of the most respected senior pilots in this entire company. Those twin girls, they're his daughters, and that elderly woman you terrorized is his mother. Jessica went absolutely white, trembling from head to toe. I didn't know, she stammered. I was just following safety protocols. From his seat, Robert Wells laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Is crushing an 8-year-old's heart medication part of your safety protocols now? Mrs. Henderson sat beside Grace, comforting Mia. Your sister's going to be okay, sweetie. See? Her breathing is already getting better. And it was. Maya's shallow gasps were deepening into regular, steady breaths. A faint touch of color was returning to her cheeks. Grace felt the change and let out a sob of pure relief. Thank you, Jesus. She looked at Dr. Kim, her eyes overflowing. You saved her life. Dr. Kim shook her head. I stabilized her. She needs a pediatric cardiac unit immediately. The plane began its descent. Captain Williams' voice came over the intercom, somber and firm. Flight attendants, prepare for landing. Emergency medical personnel and airport security will be meeting this aircraft. Jessica sat frozen in her jump seat, her face buried in her hands. And somewhere out over the vast, dark Atlantic, Captain Marcus Richardson gripped the radio in his 747 cockpit. He had spoken to Atlanta. He had heard what had been done to his daughters, to his mother. And he had made a decision. He had turned his plane around. A fully loaded 747 bound for London was turning back over the ocean because a captain's children were in danger. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see how this ends. And tell me, should Jessica Palmer face criminal charges? Drop your answer in the comments below. Flight 447 touched down with a jarring thump. Through the windows, a sea of flashing lights painted the tarmac red and blue. Ambulances, fire trucks, police cars, airport security, and a line of grim-faced airline executives looking terrified. The moment the plane stopped, paramedics rushed on board, moving with swift efficiency to row 15. Dr. Kim was already briefing them as they worked. They were followed by airport security and the horrified airline managers. At their head was Diane Foster, the director of customer relations, who knelt beside Grace. Mrs. Richardson, she said, her voice shaking with genuine emotion, I am so deeply sorry. This is unconscionable. This should never have happened. Security officers approached Jessica. Ma'am, you need to come with us. Jessica shot to her feet, her voice shrill. I was doing my job. I was following safety procedures. You can't punish me for protecting my passengers. As they escorted her off the plane, a chorus of angry shouts followed her. You should be arrested. You almost killed a child. George Henderson pointed a finger at Derek Stone, who was trying to slip away unnoticed. That man participated. He helped intimidate an elderly woman and terrorize her grandchildren. Security stopped him, and he stammered, I was just trying to help maintain order. The passengers refused to deplane until they knew Maya was safe. Several were openly weeping. Patricia Wong, the nurse, held Grace's hand, tears streaming down her own face. I have grandchildren their age, she whispered. The paramedics lifted Maya gently onto a stretcher. Mia grabbed her sister's hand, her small face resolute. I'm not leaving her. Holding hands, the twins were wheeled off the plane, Mia chattering nonstop. We're going to be okay, Maya. Daddy's coming. Grace walked beside them, exhausted but flooded with relief. Maya looked up at her, a weak smile gracing her pale lips. I knew Daddy would save us. Hours later, in a quiet hospital room, Maya rested comfortably, the steady beeping of the monitors a reassuring rhythm. Mia was curled up asleep beside her on the bed. Grace sat holding both their hands when the door opened. Marcus walked in, still in his pilot's uniform. Grace stood, and the strength she had shown for hours finally crumbled. I'm so sorry, baby, she sobbed. I couldn't protect her. Marcus held her tight. Mama, this was not your fault. You did everything right. He gathered his daughters in his arms, his face buried in their hair. Thank you, God, he whispered, for keeping my babies safe. When he finally let go, his knuckles were white where he gripped the bed rail, his jaw clenched in a cold, hard line. I'm filing formal complaints with the airline and the FAA. and I'm pursuing legal action for child endangerment and elder abuse. That woman will never fly again." A week later, the airline released its official statement. Jessica Palmer was terminated. Derek Stone was banned from the airline for life. Linda Martinez was suspended for 2 months without pay. And Tommy Chen was officially commended for his actions, receiving a company award for exceptional service. The family story, amplified by Robert Wells's viral video, sparked a national conversation about discrimination, implicit bias in air travel, and the treatment of black families. 6 months later, on a bright Saturday morning, the Richardson family boarded a plane for a long overdue vacation. As they found their seats, Maya confidently pulled out her medication. The flight attendant smiled warmly. "Would you like some juice to take that with, sweetheart?" She then turned to Mia. "And would you like some juice too?" And to Grace, "Ma'am, please let me know if there is anything at all you need." Marcus watched his daughters and his mother being treated with the simple respect they had always deserved, and his eyes filled with tears. The twins settled by the window, Grace between them, looking out at the endless expanse of clouds. "I want to be a pilot like Daddy," Mia announced. Maya smiled. "Me too. We can fly together." Grace put her arms around them, her heart full. "You can be anything you want to be in this world," she said softly. "Anything at all." And as the plane lifted off, soaring into the bright blue sky, the Richardson family flew toward a future they had fought for, a future where their story had changed things, where their courage had mattered, and where standing up had made all the difference. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with others. We'll see you in the next video.